program, peace management, health insurance counseling, transportation, healthcare, family caregiver assistance, and help determining eligibility for SNAP and PEAP. The number to call for more information is 858-8526. University Express now uses a key tag sign-in for classes. Registration forms are available if needed. Erie County will mail your scannable key tag after about 2 weeks. This tag will be used for checking in all classes countywide and replacing the sign-in sheet. If you already have a key tag for like the Club 99 or the lunch program, it's the same tag, so you wouldn't need a separate one. University Express is now available at 29 different senior centers and libraries throughout Erie County. No membership is required at any location to attend these 400 classes. You could also join more than 50 virtual classes, which are highlighted in blue in the catalog. Out of respect for our speaker and guests, please silence your cell phones. And today I am excited to introduce our speaker, Phil Stevens. Today's class is called Cults, Sects, Fringe Religious Groups in American History. Phil Stevens retired in 2019 after 48 years in the Anthropology department at the University at Buffalo, State University of New York. He received his BA in English from Yale in 1963, then served with the Peace Corps in Nigeria for 3 years. Those experiences brought him into anthropology, and he received his PhD from Northwestern University in 1973. He has conducted anthropological research in West Africa and the Caribbean. He is the author of many publications in cultural anthropology and African studies. Among his honors are 2 awards for excellence in teaching and an African chieftaincy title. One of his most popular courses at UP was on the anthropology of magic, sorcery, and witchcraft, and his book on that topic was published in 2024 by Routledge. He lectured frequently to community groups on subjects of current concern. So I now turn it over to Stephen. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. We have 21st century technology here, and I have a nice laser pointer which fits right into my hand. You see, 21st century technology, but it won't work on an electronic screen. So I've gone back to the 17th century. When I need to point something out to you. I planned about an hour. Is that about right for
Yes.
you folks, including questions? And you're not equipped to take notes, so if you have a question, ask it right away. Put up your hand right away. Don't wait until the end, okay? And I'll stop and we'll review what the topic was. So here's a lot of text, and it's in small type. Can you read that? There won't be any this small. Again, from the back row, can you read that? So you can read to yourselves faster than I can read to you. The gist of this is that the concept of cult as a controversial concept is back again. It's probably about 50 years since cult has been a controversial word. It has referred in the popular meaning to something sinister, a group of people coerced by a megalomaniacal leader with a variety of extras. The members have to sign over all of their property. The leader takes all the women for himself, that kind of thing. They have to cut off ties with the outside world, including their families, and so on. And the word itself has become pejorative and alarming to people. And the concept of cult as this meaning has risen and fallen since about the 1970s. I think before the 1970s, it was much more benign. As we'll see, the word has important meaning in anthropology and in religious studies as well. Can I move to the next slide? Okay. These are some recent headlines. Now, we're already in 2026, and these were when I put this talk together, a couple of years after I retired, in the middle of COVID, or just after the severe part of the COVID pandemic. This was hot, and I think maybe today it's simmering down again because we don't see cults in the headlines quite so often today, but it'll surely be back again. Alcoholics Anonymous is called a cult by St. Jude Retreats. This is still online. You can find this go into your whatever web browser you use, Google or whatever, and you'll find all of these reasons why Alcoholics Anonymous, whose members swear by it, whose members declare it to have saved their lives, why it's considered by some a cult. And some of the basic elements of the popular definition of cult are applied here. Can I move on, or do you want to leave it here for a moment? Okay. This is a much more recent publication by Bloomsbury. Bloomsbury is a fairly young publishing house, and they've gotten into the academic side of publishing very recently, only in the past few decades. And the rhetoric of cult, a kind of a modern history of the use of the term. Let's have a look at some specific cults. And in my experience, and as my introduction said, I was a teacher for 48 years at UB, and I taught the anthropology of religion for a good many of those years. This book that I'm referring to here, and I'll show it, I'll come back to it later, is one of the best sources of an objective study of what the concept is all about. Triggers in the 1960s and 1970s. This is a primary trigger of the concept of cult as a nefarious organization. This is Anton Zondor LaVey, who was the founder of what? Anybody know? The Satanic Temple, or the Temple of Satan. I'm sorry, I've forgotten his the name of his organization. In 1969, he published a book called darn it, I'll come back to it. Something about Satanism. He emphasized that Satanism is a legitimate philosophy. It does not recognize Satan as a being, and it does not glorify evil. It condemns evil. It purports to follow the law, but it also claims to avoid hypocrisy. It says, "Come and join me and be honest, and if do what feels good, do what makes you happy, as long as it doesn't break the law." And this was followed shortly by this fellow, Charles Manson, who with his followers were responsible for the infamous Tate LaBianca murders. And Manson died a few years ago in jail and serving a life term, and his girls are still in jail. They all kept a happy face and praised him, and his little family, as he called it, was regarded as a microcosm of the worst meaning of the word cult. And this was also the 1970s, a time of increased fears of missing children. You remember that time? And children's pictures appeared on milk cartons across the country. Have you seen me? Have you seen this child? And this was growing up to one of the most, if not the strangest and most disturbing of collective fears in the history of the country since the witch crazes of the 17th century, I would say, the satanic cult fears. And also at the same time was this man. Do you remember him? Jim Jones. Jim Jones established an organization for impoverished and oppressed people in was it San Francisco where he started, or not in San Francisco, some California city called the People's Temple. And it was genuinely helpful. It was genuinely beneficial, and he was successful in getting funding for his retreat, his organization, to try to give new life and new confidence to people who, for a variety of reasons, were on the skids, But something happened, and he moved down to Guyana and to just outside of Georgetown, and established his camp in the forest, and the rest is, as we say, history. We'll get back to him in a little while also. Headlines in our national news magazines about the mass suicide by his people. Between 600 and 700 people drank a Kool-Aid type drink laced with cyanide. Okay. And there's been a lot of examination of what happened and why they followed him and why they followed his orders to kill themselves. And also, this is a busy, fraught time, this decade of the 1970s. Wicca became very popular in the 60s and 70s. Wiccans called themselves witches. And in the popular meaning of witch, witches were agents of Satan. This is the meaning of witchcraft from the Inquisition in Western Europe in from the 14th into the 17th centuries, right? And the inquisitors were following the orders in the Bible that witches needed to be done away with. In one translation, they should be killed. So the Wiccans, who were nature worshippers, who revered a bisex god, a male-female hermaphroditic type of deity that combined male and female principles, a nature god. They followed the natural cycles of the calendar and did not believe in Satan. They did believe in Jesus, and they revered Jesus as an enlightened prophet type of person. But they were for self-improvement by allowing much more freedom than organized religion allowed. And women were attracted to Wicca, many of them former Catholics, because of the felt oppression of women by the Catholic Church. But they called themselves witches, and that was their problem. Some of them chose to go naked in their ceremonies because clothes inhibited the flow of energy between them and nature, as they explained, right? And they wanted to be totally free in their ceremonies. Also, other pagan or neo-pagan organizations like the Reformed Druids of North America in the upper picture, and other pagan groups were not exactly flourishing, but they were growing in North America. This is Tim and Morning Glory Zell, who were leaders of the Church of All Worlds, which was a modern pagan, meaning they were not explicitly Christian. That's what pagan meant, religion. And then at similar times, what came to be known as the Jesus cult, right? All of this is going on. And the magazine, which you probably are now, we are familiar with by what is now the AARP, says, forget about kids, they're after you. And the concept of cults as luring young people into their organizations and brainwashing them had already infected everybody, and now the AARP is warning that elders are just as vulnerable, perhaps even more so, because a lot of elderly people, as we know very well, are solitary and lonely and vulnerable to promises of companionship and comfort and so forth. So let's stop for a moment before we move on and look at the concept. The word itself comes directly from the Latin. It's the root for cultivate, the same root. Culture, which is my subject matter as an anthropologist. I am a cultural anthropologist interested in living people and what they do and build and believe in. And a primary meaning of the word cult is the core of a religion, the central element. The central element of the Catholic ritual is the Eucharist. And this has been called the cultus, or the Roman Catholic cult, in a very respectable but not widely used meaning of the words. It is a group focused on something or some person. We hear the term personality cult, and sometimes we hear about kind of oddball movies and plays and so on, who are attractive, which are attractive to a certain group of people, and we hear the phrase cult film or cult play, meaning their focus is pretty narrow, and that is a part of the common meaning of the term. And when I used it in my courses, I used cult to refer to a narrowly focused religious group. And the word focus is important because the group is bound together by a specific focus, a specific purpose. We'll look at some examples shortly. And it's important to recognize that the major religions of today began as marginal, narrowly focused religious groups of people who were bound together in a faith that was not only marginal, separate from the mainstream, but considered by the mainstream to be something of a threat, not only marginal and aberrant, but even a threat. Christianity took 3.5 centuries before it became established, and it was the Emperor Constantine really who declared Christianity to be the faith of the realm, and it became the Roman Catholic. If it hadn't been Constantine, it probably would have happened some other way. But that's what. Here comes one of the University Express staff. We weren't here, so I didn't give my spiel about the value of University Express. This is Eric, who's one of the staff, and I think in the introduction, what's her name? Mary Beth mentioned that there are nearly 400. More than 400?
Oh, yeah.
Sessions in just this season, the spring season. And then in the fall, there will be another nearly or over 400. I'll have some other offerings in the fall too, based on Halloween and stuff and exciting things like that. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you.
You want to say?
Great.
You
already know by now.
You want to say anything?
No, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay. And I haven't done a lot of traveling through the U.S., at least in residential. I haven't lived in a lot of other places. I'm sure that other counties have departments for what we are now called for the aging. We used to be called Department for Senior Services, which I prefer. But how many have this kind of a program? I haven't heard of any, and I think it's really unique. And it's really a boom. You can have talks and workshops and hands-on kinds of sessions on just about anything that's of interest today. So thanks for coming in.
Happy to be here.
I would have bypassed all that if I hadn't seen you. So I'm a strong proponent of, and it's also good for me. It keeps me active. It keeps my brain from deteriorating. So where are we? And Christianity was called by the Roman Tacitus that temporarily suppressed Jewish superstition. I have a spring talk on superstitions also, which is available in it. Look at the catalog a couple more times coming up. And the U.S. has a history of what we could call new religions or fringe or marginal religious groups, some of which have developed, like the Seventh-day Adventists and Jehovah's Witnesses, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, and some of which just kind of petered out and dissolved. But it is the concept of cults, the formation of new religious groups is really central to the history of the U.S., not marginal, but they have had a very strong impact. Around the late Middle Ages, the cult of the Virgin Mary developed, and it was encouraged by the church, which began to realize that women were becoming more important socially and politically, and there was no accepted counterpart to Jesus. Mary became elaborated and glorified is the right word. And on the secular side, more recently, do you remember the cult of Diana? And that was the word used for the widespread admiration for this woman and what she stood for. There was no group based on this. It was what has been called a personality cult. So just another meaning of the word. And then from 2016 onward, this new concept, which is I haven't heard the term used recently. This is the book that I referred to earlier, The Strange Gods. The subtitle is The Great American Cult Scare by two prominent sociologists at the time, David Bromley and Anson Shupe, S-H-U-P-E, 1981, Beacon Press. I'm pretty sure it's still in print. And they studied these five groups represented by the cover pictures, interviewed current members and former members who had left the groups for some reason or other, and they uniformly found that the members of the group joined voluntarily. They had social reasons for joining. Their friends were joining, that kind of thing. They enjoyed their experience in the movement, and they regretted leaving it. There were surely some exceptions to those, but in all of these five cases, at the top there are the Hare Krishnas. At the right is Jim Jones. At the bottom is Jesus. And the left is the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, who established his ashram in Antelope, Oregon, if you remember him. He's still, I don't know if he's still around, but his name is still around. And in the center is the Korean pastor, Protestant minister, Sung Myung Moon, who established the Unification Church. Is that right? Unification Church. And he had an estate up the Hudson River, I think, and he became famous for marrying 400 couples at the same time, you know, that kind of thing. And these were the five groups that were the subject of Anson and Shupe. Let's be anthropologists for a moment. Types of cults, and these are legitimate uses of the term. Millennial, millenarian, messianic, chiliastic. These are all synonyms for groups that are predicting an end of the world or an end of the world as we know it, or some kind of reconstruction of the world. Many of them focusing on the interpretation of the book of Revelation in the Bible. The most influential book of the Bible is the book of Revelation. So says Phil Stevens. And I will stand by that. Because, well, there's just so much in that book that has been influential in the development of Western culture ever since the first century of our time. Apocalyptic, doomsday, with quotes. All of these are labels given to organizations that preach the coming end of the world as we know it and the key to salvation, so that we, the members, do not experience the same fate as those others who are not following this leader. A prophet cult is a generic word used to label a cult led by a person who prophesies something like that. It could be a millenarian cult, or it might be just come with me and be good and set an example for others. Led by a leader who claims some divine insight, some divine stroke, which has given him, usually male, but some women as well. Look up the name Claire Prophet, a woman of the previous century, 19th century, who established an organization called the Church Universal and Triumphant. That was one of the largest religious movements led by a woman. Since the 1930s and 40s, given impetus by that broadcast of H.G. Wells' novel, The War of the Worlds in 1938, historians will agree that that gave a great impetus to what became in many areas of the world the flying saucer cults, people who were organized around their belief that we have been and are being observed and visited by creatures from some other dimension. In legitimate anthropology terms that I have used and described myself, ancestor cults in the religions of West Africa, where I did my research, and in Eastern Asia, the ancestors are the most important supernatural beings in people's lives, more important than the supreme being, more important than the gods. The spirits of the ancestors, because they have a direct genealogical link with us. And people are concerned primarily with their kin, secondarily with neighbors, thirdly, members of the town and so forth. Taking care of your kin is your first social responsibility. And in their spirit form, ancestors are able to do much more for us than they could when they were living. And so groups of people whose job it is to satisfy the ancestors are called ancestral or ancestral cults. In parts of Africa, in the savanna areas of Africa, the right amount of rain is absolutely critical to the survival of the people. Too much rain is as dangerous and damaging to the crops as too little rain. And so in many of these marginal or intermediary societies, in the savanna areas between the rainforest and the scrub and the desert, in that area of uncertain weather, you will find rain cults, groups of people led by priests whose job it is to control the rain. And if there's not enough, you got to get out there and make things happen and make nature produce more. And if there's too much, you got to get nature to stop. And so it's a year-round, or anyway, it's a season-long occupation. And the rainy season is a good 8 months in most sub-Saharan African cultures. The rain culture, and in the society where I was working to do my doctoral research, the Bachama of northeastern Nigeria, they're a kingdom, and they had a rain cult, and I was able to investigate and learn a lot about them. The big question that we get, come and join us, folks. Hello, come and join us. Hello, Michael. Hello. Why do people join? Who could believe this stuff? And that's a critical question that sociologists and psychologists have gone to a lot of effort to try to explain. I remember back in the late 1970s when Jim Jones and his people met their end in Guyana. That was a question I was asked by local media, and I said, to get the absolute honest answer, you got to interview the people themselves. The best we can do is say that the promise of the cult offers to people something that they feel they desperately need and can benefit by, much more convenient, much easier, much with better understanding or whatever than they can get staying in their current social situation. Often it's economic, often it's some psychological trauma that people have experienced. So loneliness is a powerful motivator for action. We are social beings, and we need social interaction. Autistic people get along okay without it, but they are, of course, thankfully, a small minority. And even many autistic people are quite social as well. So there are a lot of reasons why individuals are attracted to the promise of the prophet, the leader of the cult. You can read all this for yourselves. Now let's spend some time looking at cults that really never existed, imaginary cults, which nevertheless got people very, very excited. One of the first is the idea that the great witch hunts of Western Europe, 4 centuries of persecution and identification, inquisition, and execution of men and women, not just women, were based in a grotesque misunderstanding that, in fact, there was an organized group of people very much like modern Wiccans. They were mostly women. They had knowledge of nature. They were midwives. They tended to the dead. One of the most powerful taboos in most societies is getting close to and handling dead people. So every culture, every town has to have undertakers, right? Who will do this crucial social service. Because they were not in the mainstream, because they had knowledge of the dead and they had knowledge of herbs and of spiritual causes of disease, when things got really bad in Western Europe, cities became virtually unlivable. There were no social programs in European cities in the 14th and 15th centuries. They were grim places to try to survive in. And the witch hunts started to develop, and the idea spread that Satan is at work. And of course, the book of Revelation gave impetus to that, right? Because it says explicitly that Satan will be bound up for 1,000 years. And after 1,000 years, he will be let loose. So Jesus was executed more than 1,000 years ago. And by the turn of the first millennium of the modern era, these kinds of sentiments developed. One of the major reasons for the Crusades, which started the next century, the 11th and 12th centuries, was to free the Holy Land of the Muslims who had taken over, because Jesus could not return when the Holy Land was under Islamic control. This is not one of the reasons the history books commonly give us for the Crusades, but this kind of sentiment was developing over some centuries before it broke out as the witch hunts. Margaret Murray was an Egyptologist. She was not a Western European historian, but she wrote up this book called The Witch Cult in Western Europe, describing this alleged cult 300, 400 years earlier, of mostly women with this special knowledge, who were in fact the impetus for the Inquisition. She was dead wrong, but that was one of the first examples of imaginary cults. This is the book that was mentioned in my introduction, and I'll give some talks in the fall around Halloween time based on some stuff in there. I'll tell you more about it later. But I drew from that book my attributes of the witch, as mostly women, but about 80% of people accused of witchcraft were women, about 20% were men. And they were all accused of many of these things. Now jump several hundred years to 1980 and the decade and a half into the middle 1990s. The satanic cult fears spread around the world in mainly Christian societies, but they spread outside of Christianity because of practical fears. There are people who worship Satan, who need human sacrifice for Satan, who engage in cannibalism and vampirism and the child abduction and all these terrible things that witches engaged in. They meet in a secret place outside of the town. The members include local heads, local leaders, the fire chief, the police chief, the high school principal, many of the daycare center operators are all members of the cult. They meet outside the village somewhere weekly or monthly, plotting their subversive activities and how they're going to get children for their sacrifices to Satan. Any of you remember this? You don't? It was very active in Western New York for a while, around 1984, 1985. And there was a murder. The director of the Buffalo Museum of Science, his daughter was murdered on the railroad tracks off of Military Road in Buffalo in 1984 or 5. And this rumor spread immediately that she was killed by a satanic cult. That kind of thing. And there were rumor panics in many American towns. We'll get to that in a moment. So these are the attributes of the witch, and many, if not most, most of them, if not, definitely not all, were ascribed to Satanists. These three I have indented, numbers 3, 4, and 5. The ability to change their form, the ability to fly, and the attachment to animals were not among the charges that modern Satanists received, but all the rest of them were. Here is modern witchcraft all over again. And this fear of organized a network of satanic cults spread around the world. And it was totally imaginary. There were some copycat crimes, and a lot of kids had Anton LaVey's books in their school bag because it was fascinating reading. And all of that was LaVey's own imagination. He drew from some of the occult thinking of the late Middle Ages, but most of it was his own. It was a terrible time. It started to die out in the middle 1990s, but these all of these elements were found in the satanic cult accusations, and some lives were spoiled. Some accusations really upset people. Children turned on their parents. Women, young men and women in their 30s who were experiencing some kind of anxiety under the care of modern counselors were having repressed memories brought out of their infancy and their early childhood when their parents were members of a satanic cult and they themselves were the victims, and they were forced to eat the flesh of other child victims. Then they confessed to these kinds of things. And in October 1988, the Hispanic American journalist Geraldo Rivera, remember him? He had his own TV show. And in October 1988, you can look this up, he displayed on his program a number of women who claimed to have been kidnapped and held by the cult in their local community and impregnated by the cult leaders and made to bear their children for the cult so that their children were undocumented. And the FBI could not prosecute, right? And Geraldo himself issued a public call for, in his own words, I remember this distinctly, a full-scale congressional investigation of the international network of satanic cults, or the international satanic cult conspiracy. I think that was the phrase. So it fizzled out. Here are some others. Now let's get back to cults again. If anybody have questions, I'm moving right along. Okay. Look, you can look these up. The growth of America experienced a lot of difficulties over the years, social upheavals of various sorts. And during those times, the promises of a kooky prophet off in the margins became attractive to people. We had witches here too. Some 56 people were executed for witchcraft in the colonies. 19 or 20 of them in Salem, and the rest a whole number in Hartford and other villages. The first prosecution for witchcraft was in Connecticut, Windsor, Connecticut in 1638, I think. And through that century, there were a total of 56 people executed and a large number put in prison. There was a real organization of people in Philadelphia, and the site for their headquarters is still there in one of the parks in the city of Philadelphia, the Society of the Woman in the Wilderness, which was an apocalyptic movement which based its doctrine on a passage in Revelation chapter 12, verses 1 to 7, where the woman in the wilderness is described. Now, many movements, apocalyptic movements that took inspiration from Revelation had not at all studied Revelation. What is really going on? What does this really mean? You know, and a lot of it comes from early pagan beliefs. In any case, this was an important one of people who wanted a better life for themselves. From 1694 for about 12 or 14 years in Philadelphia. And the one that still exists, an apocalyptic movement, which came to be called the Shakers, developed in New York State in the Hudson Valley. The Hudson Valley was a breeding ground for a lot of movements in the 18th and 19th centuries. The United Society of Believers in Christ's Second Appearing came to be known as the Shakers because of the trance dances they went into. Now, one of the Shakers' biggest problems, of course, was that they abstained from sexual intercourse, and they could only perpetuate themselves by conversion. Jonathan Edwards, sinners in the hands of an angry God, developed a number, this kind of religious fervor, developed a number of Christian movements, a number of pagan movements developed. Here's the one on the right at Stonehenge, and the North American Druids were followers. A number of so-called utopian communities developed in the U.S. in the 18th and 19th century. We've already mentioned the Shakers. These others, their sites are located and marked with historic markers today: New Harmony, Brook Farm, and Fruitlands. Utopian is another word for a millennial, but the promise is a utopia on earth. They're not preparing for the end. They're developing for a better life based on the doctrine of the group itself. The Amana movement, which swept through Western New York and gave its name to a line of household appliances, remember? And the Oneida movement, led by John Humphrey Noyes, who sustained themselves with their silver company, Oneida Silversmiths. They were a utopian community. Joseph Smith developed his international movement not far from here, right in Palmyra, where the famous hill, the Hill Cumorah, exists. I think the Cumorah Festival is now defunct, isn't it? People used to flock there to see the festival, and they moved west, and their fates are known. The mainstream Mormons expanded and set up their huge headquarters in Salt Lake. The fundamentalist Mormons some of which still exist. They are polygynists, and they are kind of a fringe, but left alone because they're not harming anybody, although they are marginal in obeying the social laws about marriage. William Miller, who was the founder of the Millerites, also in the Hudson Valley, 1834, in the town of Lowhampton in Washington County, near the Vermont border. And he specified the date when the end times were going to begin. And the first thing that's going to happen is the rapture, right? The believers are going to be taken bodily up to heaven. And in 1844, in October, people climbed up on their roofs with suitcases and their coats and hats, really waiting for the great event, which turned into the Great Disappointment. And that is a label given to that period of history by the followers. The Millerites developed into the Seventh-day Adventists. This is William Miller's house, which is a tourist spot. You can have a tour of his house. Charles Taze Russell, the founder of the Watchtower movement, which developed into the Jehovah's Witnesses, the so-called Second Great Awakening. And Whitney Cross, a historian, gave this label to that strip of land from the Hudson Valley right through here into Ohio, which throughout the 19th century was what he called the burned over district. People were burning with religious zeal, and countless groups were formed. I don't know how clear this is for you. He has identified 5 of the most important kinds of groups that developed in the 19th century. What was going on? The young republic was expanding. There was the Indian threat on the frontier, which was pretty close to us at that time. There was a question of employment. There was a question of survival, subsistence, and immigration. There was a huge influx of totally foreign people who spoke no English at all and came from other cultures. And these are areas of intense religious fervor as a result of this widespread activity. You might know about the Fox sisters. Spiritualism developed. Spiritualism is a full-fledged religion today. They were frauds, and they finally confessed, but they had started a new movement based on communication with deceased relatives. It is a Christian movement. And there are a number of theological and other forms of explanations. I'm going along quickly because I'm realizing we have reached our hour and we have actually passed it. So all of these things were going on. And there was also a great swell of occultism coming from England and France. You know the name of Aleister Crowley, perhaps. He was one of the most famous or infamous, depending on how you viewed him, of these new occultists who couldn't find satisfaction in the established religions, and so they established kind of new ones. Helena Blavatsky was the founder of, what was the name of her faith? Sorry, I'm blanking. Eliphas Levi was the pen name of Alphonse Louis Constant, who developed the concept of the Baphomet, which was adopted later and today by the Satanists. It's a horrible creature, half goat and half human, with one hand up and one hand down, and a positive and a negative. You may have seen it. It symbolizes the values of Satanism. Anti-slavery movements, women's rights, all of these were creating real disruptions in society, making people vulnerable to and interested in alternative religions, as they were called. So we can summarize here and stop. In the 21st century, one of the modern movements really does follow the traditional nefarious pejorative meaning of cult. Rainier, Keith Rainier was the founder and leader of Nixium, which was a sexual cult, and he did convince young women to follow him and to submit to his depraved promises and to get themselves tattooed, and it was a scandal just a couple of decades ago, right? And some elements of it are still existing. The Westboro Baptist Church in Kansas, run by a group of a family which got the label of the most hated family in America. The Phelps family. Oh, sorry, I'm out of order here. The Church of Scientology has received a lot of criticism for being a cult and has been charged with indoctrinating people, including some of the charges being labeled against AI today, leading people to both suicide and to murder. Who is this?
Ellie Herbert.
Yeah. Oh, she was a Scientologist. That's right. Sorry, you can see it better than I can. My type is, and here's a front page story in the New York Times about a famous criminal case laid at the feet of Scientology, and aberrant Mormons who had formed their own cult, which involved murder. Do you remember these people? They're Chinese, they're Taiwanese. They settled in Texas and then moved up to Olcott on the shores of Lake Ontario to establish their little organization led by their leader, whom they called Teacher Chen. They lived in Lewiston for a while. The reason we've got so many here is that there are so many. We could keep on going. Vernon Lee Howells, who took the names of two great messiahs of history, David and Cyrus. The Hebrew name for Cyrus was Koresh. He called himself David Koresh, and he led that group in Waco, Texas, which ended in flames. The Heaven's Gate people in California, one of the so-called flying saucer cults, who's mostly computer nerds who joined and who followed Marshall Applewhite, who promised that they would kill themselves laid out under purple cloths, and their souls would join the occupants of a spaceship that was right behind the comet Hale-Bopp, B-O-P-P, which was in the news at the time. And right behind the comet was the spaceship that was going to take them to a better life in a different dimension. And here's the death house where their bodies were found. And the Westboro Baptist Church, run by the Phelps family, who argued that homosexuality was brought by Satan and homosexuals were sinners. And this was their primary message, and they made an effort to go to any kind of gay rallies, Rainbow Coalition meetings, anywhere in the country, and try to disrupt things. And they got the notion of the label of the most hated family in America. Here's Keith Raniere and one of his adult women victims. A couple of them were quite wealthy, including a woman who was heir to the Seagram fortune, the whiskey and the distillery, and that's the tattoo. The brand, actually, it was made with a hot iron, not a tattoo, that they were made to have on their inner thigh, I think. And then the Sarah Lawrence cult, which was really strange. The father of a Sarah Lawrence girl who moved in, and somehow, I don't know the full story, you can look it up, the Sarah Lawrence cult, Sarah Lawrence College, and a number of women followed him and his bizarre directives. So that's where we will stop. I could spend a lot of time on any of those. Do you have any questions at all?
Just a comment. It appears that a lot of the cults are built on young people, at least initially. And so it makes me think that, first of all, what's socially going on around that causes people to move that direction in any of those periods of time. And then secondly, why it's young people who aren't discerning well.
Why is it
They
focused on
don't discern well what group they belong to, so they join cults.
Yeah, and this is one of the ways in which all of the attributes of witches in the late Middle Ages and of Satanists of the 20th century, they focus on children. Now, the word children can mean any people up to teenage years under legal adulthood, right? And this is a universal concern, one of these fundamental fears, which is the classic flying, transforming, imaginary witch. embodies fundamental human fears, the kinds of things that people have nightmares about. And the abduction of children stimulates visceral reactions in people, even non-parents, in animals as well. As we know very well, adult animals will sacrifice themselves, will run away to try to distract the danger to their chicks or their pups or whatever their infants are. So the focus on children is a common thread throughout all of these kind of coercive movements, or at least the fear of coercive movements. And children embody innocence on the one hand, but also the future. Future promise is in them as well. Anything else? All right, thanks for your attention and for staying with us for longer than the time.
Interesting.